Super Morning Show is hosting Communications Minister Ursula Owusu-Ekufo. They're talking about quite a lot of things. Let's cross over now, catch up with the conversation between her and Daniel Dade.
Provided networks on all the campuses. We have the Ghana Academic Research Network, which links researchers and academicians, lecturers in all the campuses. We paid, there's a matching grant. The Ministry of Communications paid part of it, and the World Bank also supported us by picking up the rest of the tab. And so on all the campuses, we're extending it to the new universities as well.
The technical universities?
That's a good point. The public universities for now. We're focusing on that. It's a fair bit of money, but we think it's important to reduce the cost of data for researchers so that they can innovate better in that space. And so we're working with them within that network to facilitate that. Now I've just made a mental point of it that we need to factor in the technical universities as well. That's a fantastic point you just made, actually. You just dropped my mind.
It seems that there's a lot on your plate for anybody at all. But for you, how do you deal with gender stereotyping in your line of work?
I've had a few firsts in this industry, and I think in 2017 I made a speech at the World Telecoms Development Conference in Buenos Aires. And it had just occurred to me that morning. I'd already written my speech, but I just inserted that, and it caught the attention of almost everybody in the room. 15 years ago, I was the only female CEO of a telecoms company in Ghana. And so when we met, I was the only woman in the room. People forget that I've been in the industry before, and sometimes I just smile to myself. We don't just talk lightly. We know some of the inner workings of the industry. It's changed a lot since that time, though, but the fundamentals still remain the same. At the time I was speaking, which was 2 years ago, there was only one male CEO, which was Ebenezer Asante, MTN. All the other CEOs were females, from Yolanda to
Roshi Motsman at the time.
Who's the third person?
So if you're looking at Airtel, Tigo, Vodafone,
Airtel was Tigo was Roshi.
Airtel was Lucy Quist before.
Lucy, yes, but who took over from Lucy?
No, after Lucy was the merger.
Yeah. So there was Yolanda, there was Roshi, and then Emmanuel. So when they met, there was only one male in the room, and everybody was like, wow. Many of the chief technical officers of the telcos are females. Now, a lot more in the West African sub-region. 6 ministers are women in West Africa. And increasingly, women are beginning to occupy managerial positions in this previously male-dominated industry. The numbers are still tipped against women. There are far more men in this industry than there are men, but we're beginning to hold our own. And the head honcho here is me. So please, so I beg, this one is just agro. Take it seriously. Please don't attack me for saying I'm the head honcho, but I really am the minister.
No, you know what?
Yeah, I'm the head
you know what? It's actually in line with my next question, because you are the most senior minister we've had this week in studio, and this week the topic for discussion for many Ghanaians has been, the PDS saga, termination and not, and what have you. So, in just a few minutes, we just want to know your comments. It's become a topical issue. What's your view on it?
Well, I think we all need to realize that electricity generation distribution is a key utility. We can't do without power. And so any issue surrounding power should be of great concern to the government. Their entry into the compact was well-intentioned. There are issues, major issues there that need to be fixed. But if the company, and we all lose sight of the fact that it isn't government which oversaw the procurement process in this, it is MEDA and the American government. They said the whole process was managed by them, with government as a key stakeholder observing, more or less, and they running some of the issues by them. And then we decide that this is of key interest to us, so please focus on this area, particularly the shareholding structure. I mean, it's our asset, and so to make us 20% shareholder in that was a no-no. And so when we took office, the president insisted, and rightly so, that the majority shareholding should come to government. Now, if one of the key conditions to Ghana, if one of the key conditions in the agreement is not maintained, and the guarantee is meant to protect us in the event of default in the management of our asset, and so it should be of interest to us. And so if they are mandated to provide an insurance bond, and at the end of the day it turns out that there are major issues with it, should we overlook it? Now, if they continue to manage this asset and there is a problem and they default, or our asset is damaged in any way, how do we get protection from it? So this is a fundamental condition of the contract, which they were unable to meet. Should government just have glossed over it?
Allow them to remedy it?
Well, I'm sure they were given the chance to remedy it. In the time that the suspension was announced till the termination was announced.
Information we have is that they were not given a chance. In fact, they did remedy it, but this decision was carried out anyway.
I'm not aware of it. And to how did they remedy it? But the point I'm making is that it's so fundamental that in other smaller procurements that we've done, if you don't provide a good bond, you're disqualified. I mean, that's one of the terms in which people are not shortlisted. One of the conditions that if they don't meet, they don't even make the final cut at all. So it's a big issue. And I think we need to look at it that way. It was government which noticed that there were challenges with this guarantee. It was government which took steps to protect our assets by suspending the contract for a while it looked at it. It is government which is insisting that we look at this whole structure. Maybe it's seen that PDS didn't quite have the capacity to undertake the task that it had contracted to. So at all steps in the chain, government had taken steps to protect our major asset, which is our electricity and power distribution network. How do we get faulted for it?
Is MEDA not, the MEDA CEO is an appointee of the president, the board, many ministers of state. So people say we can't ring fence MEDA's responsibility here.
MEDA works up to is implementing the Millennium Challenge account, which is a U.S. initiative to assist us in this part of the world. As part of the arrangements, government has to set up a local structure to manage it, and that's how MEDA comes into the question. But at every stage in the way, MEDA cannot say that it is just doing the bidding of the government of Ghana without reference to its core direct operate answering mechanic. It answers to MCC, and all its actions have to be in line with the U.S. project which has been set up. And so even though government sets it up, yes, they have their terms of reference and they are supposed to work according to it. They manage this whole process from day one. And we forget that it predates, this whole compact predates the MPP administration in government, and it had gone a fair way towards the previous government had the previous MEDA board had done a lot of work to complete this process before we came in, and there was no way we could abrogate everything that had been done and start afresh. So we continued with the process that had already been continued. So I just want us to focus on the issue. When government noticed that there was something wrong, should we have sat by and done nothing? As I've indicated, in other procurement processes, tender processes, if you provide a defective guarantee, insurance bond, whatever it is, you're disqualified. You're not allowed to continue to the next stage. Your attention could have been drawn to it so that you remedy it. It is not done, So judging by the practice in procurement, government was well within its rights to raise that issue and to seek termination of it. Because if you flouted this key condition at the onset, what else aren't you going to do going on further down the line? So it's out of the abundance of caution that we took this step. Yes, we've lost $190 million. What are the value of the assets of ECG? It far outweighs this $190 million.
I'm hearing this point being made repeatedly about the value of the assets, but information we have is that the ECG assets have actually been insured already. This was just a demand guarantee on the performance of an action by PDS over the course of the concession.
I won't presume to know what the full details of this are, because so
you know what? Let's go to your lane.
I listen to what's going on, but I think that sufficient explanations have been given, and I would like Ghanaians to give your own government. We're very suspicious of our governments. Why? Sometimes I really ask myself why. We'll much rather take what some outside I won't say civil society, foreigners, private sector, as if everybody in government is an idiot. We aren't. And we really do have the interest of a country at heart. We swore an oath to that effect. And we will do our best within our human capabilities to live up to that oath. So cut us some slack.
Okay, it's 24 minutes past 8. Esther Ose-Ekufo is Minister for Communications. She's our guest in studio. We've been talking a bit about her work so far and about the PDS termination. Now, let's go to, like she was saying earlier, Helene, the communication service tax. Since you last addressed the public, you had an interview with Evans Menta. I imagine negotiations have been ongoing with the telcos. How far have they come along?
We're actually meeting with them later today. It's been a week, and we're keeping them on a short leash. So we want to review progress, what has gone on, what challenges they're making. They had a meeting last week with a joint meeting with Finance, GRA, and the Ministry of Communications. And they said that, yes, they would abide by the directives as given. I think that was on Tuesday last week. We had a press conference on Monday. They met on Tuesday.
Okay.
Yes. They would abide by the directives, but they do need some time to configure their systems to enable it take effect. And they would compensate their subscribers for whatever they had lost within that period. So I just want to assure everybody that, yes, the upfront notifications may be still ongoing, but they're working on it, and we're working with them to ensure that that process takes effect within the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. That's the timeline that they said they needed to actually configure their systems to effect it.
I heard 6 to 8 weeks. You said this was last week.
Oh, yes. But I'm telling them that if they focus their minds, they can do it in a shorter time.
In 3 to 4 weeks.
When there's a gun to your head, you can work miracles.
So what happens if they don't keep to that deadline?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Ultimately, the ultimate sanction if you flout directives of the regulator is a suspension or revocation of your license. And the law says so clearly. Interestingly, too, The 2G licenses of MTN and Vodafone are up for renewal on 1st December 2019. For Tigo, it's 2021. I forget what it is for Glo. We're having conversations around there. This is not a threat, but I'm saying that the law says that the ultimate sanction, if you continually flout the Electronic Transactions Communications Act and your regulations and directives given by the regulator, are a suspension or a revocation of your license. And we're all aware of that, and we're working to ensure that we never ever come to that point.
You mentioned compensation, that the telcos have agreed to compensate subscribers.
Yep.
Yeah, so can you shed some light on that?
After the meeting this afternoon, I'll be in a position to.
Okay, but subscribers would receive some sort of cushioning from the telcos?
When they configure their systems, they say they would give back to subscribers what they have lost out within the period, if any. And we would know more about how they intend to do that. They're working with the regulator on this. The regulator was also in the meeting with the Ministry of Finance. And so we're having another meeting this afternoon. You should have waited to have spoken to me tomorrow, and I could have given you a fuller update on this. So let's just watch the space, and we'll be in a position to give you more information on this.
Okay.
After our meeting this afternoon.
Okay. So you issued a directive to the NCA to make a demand or ask the telcos to do something. The legality of that directive has been called into question. What's your basis for doing that?
I find it rather amusing. You know, the communications service tax is a sector-specific tax. The law setting up that tax itself mandates the Minister for Communications to work with the Ministry of Finance to set up a monitoring mechanism for that tax, which directly invites me into the administration of that tax. So if somebody says that the Minister for Communications has no business talking about how that tax is going to be administered, the law itself gives me that power to work with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that we monitor the implementation of that tax. So it's not me, it is the law.
We also know that the minister is empowered to issue directives to an extent, but some say these directives that you are issuing are tantamount to interference, into the market.
Well, the law doesn't restrict the areas in which the minister can issue policy directives. It doesn't give a list of areas in which the minister can or cannot issue directives to regulate the sector. So what do they mean by interference? Anything that anybody issued a license under the Electronic Communications Act does, anything they do within the ambit of that law is also subject to directives issued by the minister within the power granted her under that law. But we can argue till we're blue in the faces, in our case it's purple in the face, about what is or what isn't the right interpretation of that law. Fortunately for us, we have a body which interprets the law passed by Parliament and how it is executed by the executive. That's the judiciary. Instead of us pushing our own understanding, reading, and interpretation of the law down the throats of everybody else, why don't you test it in that forum?
It's interesting you mentioned that because reference has been made to the Revenue Administration Act 2016, Act 915, subsections 1 and 2. Subsection 1 says the GRA is responsible through the Commissioner General for administering and giving effect to tax laws in accordance with the provisions of the Ghana Revenue Authority Act. Now, without limiting the powers and responsibilities of the Commissioner General under the GRA Act, the Commissioner General may give written directives that are necessary for the implementation of tax laws.
How does that affect me?
It's only the Commissioner General who is mentioned here, which is the question that has been raised.
What does the Communications Service Tax Act say? It says that the Ministry of Finance can work with the Ministry of Communications to set up a monitoring mechanism for the implementation of the Communications Service tax. I'm not dealing with the administration looking at the one which is sector specific and affects my sector. Now, with the Ministry of Tourism.
And that's Communications Minister Ursula Ekufo on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM with Daniel Datsey.